The all-new 2024 VW Atlas. This vehicle just received its mid-cycle refresh. I'm going to be honest, it's not all good. So what is the VW Atlas? Well, this is Volkswagen's three-row SUV, which is arguably their most important vehicle in their North American lineup. It was designed specifically for us North American buyers. Unlike the Touareg, the Atlas's goal was to be comfortable, very big, and inexpensive. And to be honest, it felt a bit generic and cheap. That's what they tried to address with the 2024 model year. They tried to make it feel a little bit more upscale. Now, this vehicle is still relatively inexpensive. It starts in the very high 30s, honestly reasonably well-equipped models in the 40s, and this SEL is almost $50,000, which again does make it quite expensive, but it's right in line with all of its other three-row competitors, and there are a lot of them. So what's new for 24? Well, you get new front and rear fascias, and the interior space has been updated. From a practicality perspective, however, it's largely all carryover, as it is the same car underneath. You get about 97 cubic feet of cargo capacity with all three rows down. With the third row up, you're looking at like 20-ish cubic feet, which is big enough for some golf bags or a basic run to the grocery store. The third row is comfortable enough for adults you don't like, really children. The second row, which this car has the optional captain's chairs, are actually pretty comfortable. There's a lot of air vents back there. There's a lot of USB ports. It's a very usable vehicle. The belt line in this car is actually pretty low, which means you have good visibility. The seating position for the drivers and passengers are comfortable. This car in higher trim levels gets heated and cooled seats. And there's really good storage in the front of this vehicle. You can put your purse down here or a small backpack. You have a lot of storage nooks in the center console, big door pockets, and a giant glove box. So what's different? Well, the material choices in this cabin are a little bit more upscale. They feel a little bit less VW Jetta-y or a little bit less cardboard-y. However, the overall design language is still pretty sterile despite their new wood trim. The big change is the infotainment screen. Take a look at the old one, now look at this. Well, yes, the screen is much bigger. It is far more difficult to use. The last generation Atlas had physical controls for everything. This does not. While you maintain more traditional steering wheel controls, thankfully, that are not haptic, you get the new VW infotainment that everybody hates. You don't get any feedback from the HVAC controls or the volume controls. They're not backlit at night, and they don't register a lot of your inputs. The actual head unit software itself is relatively fast, but at least at my time with this car, it's not been the most stable. It's crashed twice to the point where I had to restart the entire head unit. Not a great sign for a car that's nearly 50 grand. VW knows this though, and they're planning to make this as stable as possible with future OTA updates. And honestly, they're probably going to move away from this software altogether. And if I am a betting man, which I'm not, hopefully they add back physical controls because everyone is complaining about it. With that said though, let's head into the shop and put this thing up on the lift. In the shop with the 2024 VW Atlas. So what did they change? Well, they've simplified your drivetrain options. You now get one, the EA888 Evo 4. This is their latest generation of the EA888, their ubiquitous 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. You sadly lose the VR6, and most importantly, you lose the VR6 sound. However, they claim this is the better drivetrain. It's definitely more refined than the prior generation EA888, and it does have more available torque earlier in the RPM band than the old VR6, and it's actually quicker. What did they change to the EA888? Well, you get a new turbocharger, a laundry list of internal changes, everything from reducing friction, so you get a quieter experience. All the mechanical improvements combined lead to 34 more horsepower and 17 foot-pounds of torque, making this produce about 269 horsepower, 273 foot-pounds of torque, which is good for 0 to 60 about half a second quicker than the old VR6, which is a good thing. Fuel economy in the city, high teens, highway, mid-20s, at least in all-wheel drive. When it comes to the layout of this vehicle, it's still built on the prior generation MQB, which means you don't get the aluminum front subframe and the latest body enhancements. However, it is still a quiet vehicle. You can get this in either front-wheel drive or 4Motion all-wheel drive. It's strut front, multi-link rear. It's a fairly easy vehicle to access things in, and actually when you take this thing off-road, it's reasonably capable. However, with all that said, I think it's time for us to go take this for a quick drive. Jack. Yes, Mark. 888 goodness mark.
In sport mode, it brings out the kind of tone I've been looking for in a 3-row SUV. But before we get into all the nonsense stuff that nobody cares about, what people care about is they're buying a 3-row SUV because they need an appliance.
Yes.
It's a functional hauler. It's supposed to put people in it. It's supposed to do a certain amount of things that you need it to do as a family vehicle without fail and without frustration. It's supposed to ride well. It's supposed to be comfortable, and it's supposed to be reliable. It's a de-stressing device.
Yeah, it's an appliance. You basically a transportation pod for you and your family to go places. And the best you can hope for in a vehicle like this that is not some hyper expensive like Cayenne Turbo GT or something is that you don't loathe your time in the vehicle. I've talked to quite a few people that own these things as they are extremely popular, including Deb from Andy the Lab and some of my neighbors that own these vehicles. And the reason they pick them is they do the functional hauling thing exceptionally well. Trunk is huge. You're looking at almost 97 cubic feet of cargo capacity.
That's a lot.
Making it one of the biggest 3-row SUVs. It does a good job in making sure the 3rd and 2nd row occupants are comfortable. The seating solutions are easy to use. They're not electronic. They fold basically flat. They're easy to move around. And it's big enough in places like the door cards and the center consoles that it's basically, again, a minivan without feeling like a minivan. And I think the VW-ness of this car, the thing that you hate about it, the hyper-generic, sterile interior, is something that a lot of other people really, really enjoy. And I do think the drivetrain in this, yes, the VR6 was more charismatic, but this 4-cylinder, as sort of soulless as it may feel, it is a very good 4-cylinder. It makes a lot of power, it's refined, ultra smooth, and you don't feel any of the rattliness that this 4-cylinder puts off versus some of its other competitors. I think this is better than the 3.8 in the Telluride. It's probably better than the 2.4 in the Toyota and Lexus. Maybe not as reliable, but just in refinement. Because again, this is the motor that is in every Audi, VW, Porsche, Skoda on the market. They spent a lot of money on it. But as a driving experience, because this is a generation behind things like the new Grand Highlander, like the new Pilot, like the CX-90, it's so like uninspired to be behind the wheel of.
This one's really hard for me. As you know, I'm a big fan of 3-row SUVs because I've owned 2 now, and I look at the segment a lot and how much money is going into it. There's a ton of engineering budget to make these things better and bigger, and some of the first electric 3-rows from Hyundai and Kia, Lucid with the Gravity, and you have the EX90 from Volvo. That's like a first attempt at putting out electric haulers. That's how big the segment is that's what they're focusing on. So there's going to be a lot of competition. And I look at this car, I look at this as a whole, and I know I wasn't in the previous video.
Because you were busy at the ice cream factory.
Yeah, and I think I'd rather be. To me, spending about 10 minutes in this, it's like driving around a lobotomy. And I'm not kidding, there's something about it when you look at all the other competition, and I can tell you exactly what it is. Volkswagen is so big, they're so successful, that they have so many products that they are spread out so thin. They don't have time to put passion or any type of like attention to detail in vehicles. They're just like literally looking at a spreadsheet. They have these charging or marching orders for all their engineers to hit X, Y, and Z criteria, and they're like, we did it, let's move on to the next thing. That's all this is, and that's what I feel like it is driving it. It is one of the most boring, least memorable 3-row vehicles you can get into. And and again, if you were just, I'm just going to say this, if you park this next to a CX-90 and you drove them back to back, it's like the polar opposite of mentality, where you have a company that is putting every single thing they have into it. Everything they have into it. And you look at this and they're just like, that's good enough. And, slap a lower price on it because they can put a lower price on it and people buy it. I don't get it. I really don't with all the competition, but I also get why it's great and why people buy it a lot too.
I think the reason you buy this, not at $50,000, it's just too much money. And at that point, you're buying like a CX-90 or a Pilot or a Grand Highlander. I think if you got one in the low 40s, it does a lot of the refinement things, like the drivetrain, like the gearbox, like the ride quality, like the basic handling principles better than things like a regular Highlander or a Traverse. Some of it's not premium competition. I think the thing that I guess you may not appreciate about the VW is that it really is very cheap.
Yeah.
And in the very cheap three-row space, most of them are ultra shitty.
Yeah.
The fact that this one is not.
Well, that's the thing. Does it make it good because it's an appliance that it does X, Y, and Z? Just this is like if somebody going to school and they get a C average. They're like a 2.5 GPA, right? They're just coasting through. They did everything as the assignment required and nothing more. That's what it's like. And I feel like there's a level of mediocrity, or it's so mediocre. And again, I can't really complain about it.
I think it's because it's old.
Maybe, but I honestly, I truly believe VW doesn't look at what everybody else is doing. They're not going to look at a CX-90. They're not going to look at Toyota. They're not going to look at the Palisade and be like, wow, they really push the boundaries of trying to create some spirit, some style to an otherwise like lobotomy segment, right? They don't care.
At least for a product that's only designed for us.
Right.
This isn't like the Tiguan is sold elsewhere. This is sort of sold elsewhere, but the Atlas is really designed for an American market.
Yeah.
The Touareg, which is the MLB Evo, that's the Q7, the Cayenne, the Urus platform. That vehicle sold like shit here, right? It was too expensive, too small, too compromised for the people who want three-row SUVs. VW's answer was this thing: let's just make something that's really cheap, really big, really soft, and a little bit has a little bit of the VW-ness, and it'll sell well, and it has so far. So what do we know?
No, it's not really that they did anything wrong. It's a reflection of what this segment is in the commodity area. I think the bar is pretty low. I think people don't have a high level of expectation. They're literally just looking at this. It fits the bill, and they just buy it. And I think it's sad because you spend so much time in it, and that's what I look at this. You're spending a lot of time in here. Don't you want more than just
good?
Yeah, just average. And because of the competition so much better, I look at it that way, and I don't know if other people do, but I would tell you 100%, don't just buy this sight unseen. Go look at the other competition because they've gotten so much better.
So my question for you, as this is now changed into a different conversation versus just, hey, look at the new Atlas. This is an incredibly competitive segment. Say you're going to spend in the mid $40,000 range. What three-row SUV do you buy?
I mean, that's a really hard choice, but I mean, the first that I'm going to look at, if you want some effort put into it, is the CX-90s, despite our problems with it. And then I look at the Grand Highlander, because that's what this is, but not a complete, like,
and you get
cardboard box. Yes. It's not a cardboard box or a piece of drywall on wheels. And then from there, the Telluride and Palisade, they're old too. They're old. They don't feel like this. They may not be as smooth and refined and average handling as this, but it's a better SUV, honestly, to live with every day. It's better. The tech's better. The usability part that I need to drive this thing, like that I'm interacting with, is better. I don't have to mess with all this trash that they keep ruining my life with, Jack.
For me, it's the two that come to mind. Yeah, the CX-90, they put a lot of effort into it, but I don't think it drives as well as the new Pilot.
Yeah.
I think the new Pilot in this price point, with not the SH all-wheel drive, but their torque vectoring all-wheel drive,
the VTM,
is the best handling of the non-premium three rows. And then the Grand Highlander, as much as I don't like driving it, is the best NPC one, because if you get a hybrid, it gets tremendous fuel economy.
Right.
To your point, this is the one, again, because it is a refresh of an aging platform. I feel like this is the one that
if you line this up next to all the other ones we just talked to, you're not choosing this if you really are looking at it objectively and you're driving all of them.
Unless you're getting this for like $42,000.
Right, it's the price. If you're choosing it on price only, that's the only reason why you would take this over the competition at this point. I don't get it, but I'm going to let you do the final thoughts because you already know what I'm going to say and it's not worth me saying anything else.
All right, Mark, let's get into the final thoughts, sir. Final thoughts on the VW Atlas. And I'm going to be honest, I agree largely with Mark. This is sort of a middle-of-the-road vehicle in a very competitive segment. And the big issue with it is that it's old underneath. Despite the mid-cycle refresh, this is a car that came out in the late 2010s, and a large segment of its competition is brand new. CX-90, new Pilot, Grand Highlander. All these vehicles have studied the current competitive set and improved upon that formula. The CX-90 is better handling and honestly looks better exterior and interior wise. The Pilot with the torque vector and rear diff handles much better, and it's softer, and it's basically a minivan inside. And you have Honda reliability. The VW's biggest advantage, or its biggest pro in this space, is its cost. The price is still relatively low. The E8888 4-cylinder engine is very refined. The 8-speed auto is pretty good, and this handles better than the Kia Telluride or a regular Highlander or Grand Highlander. It's just not as dynamic as the CX-90 or Pilot, or as completely soft and as couch-like as the Grand Highlander. So it's this sort of middle ground of mediocrity, and that's the problem with the Atlas. With that though, I do still think it's worth driving and seeing if you value what the VW adds in this competitive set. With that said, thanks for watching. Hope to see you soon.